What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here and welcome to a new album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest third studio solo album from Liam Gallagher, entitled Come On You Know. This is a new album to be released through the record label of Warner Brothers Records, and this is the follow-up to my personal favourite solo album of his, the warmer received album of Why Me Why Not in 2019. The former frontman of one of the world's biggest rock bands of all time, Oasis, has returned back with a vengeance to tease us with new material, and for the first time in his own solo career direction, that this is going to be something that was totally unexpected than what he used to do previously on his first two albums of As You Were, and as I've mentioned just now, of Why Me, Why Not. And I have been a fan of Liam's solo approach for quite some time now. Why Me, Why Not was to me a very, very good album. It's very consistent and packed with a lot of memorable hooks to these beautiful melodies that were so vulnerable, personal and reflective, and even containing some of Liam's best hitting tracks of Shockwave, Once, One of Us. But on this record, Liam decides to paint things even bigger and larger with multiple influences and various occasions on trying out some new things. And being this album, as what many say, as his most experimental album yet, I was pretty intrigued onto the sound on the first couple of singles, the February released single of Everything's Electric, to the latest single of Better Days, which was released last month in April. And when I was looking forward to hear this album, I was pretty confident and very anticipated into what this album is going to be like for the first time listening experience. But the more I have been diving into this record, played this record a few more times, the more I've been diving into it. Personally, in my opinion, this is unfortunately, in a very brutally honest way, that this is, without any shadow of a doubt, the weakest album that Liam has put out. But what I really appreciate the most about this album is the acceptance and the big variety that this album does have that the previous two albums don't have. And I really admire the big take on this move, because this was filling up many different new spaces in far between from the beginning to the finishing moments of this record, and I was impressed by the amount onto these different sounds, on textures and presentation for what this album is going to be like for many. Before I start with this album's cover art, it is very bland. It's basically the aftermath of a performance, of a televised performance live at Reading, and this is just basically a generic idea, and it feels like your typical everyday selfie, and that really makes a very minimal impression of me, because I was really into the artwork on the minimal beginning look of As You Were, to the well-crafted and coloured artwork on Why Me, Why Not, but this was just completely forced. And even on to the amount of producers for this record. There are 9 producers for this record because of the amount of stuff going on with this record and the amount of effort that's been put into this, which I accepted very highly. But when you have too many people to work on a single record, things would just be in a jumbled up, a mixed up direction. The first song on the album More Power opens on the acoustic guitar playings in a slow pace with children's choirs and a main progression that was very consistent, a mellow mood than a big banging start like on tracks of Wall of Glass and Shockwave from the few previous albums. Liam's vocals were impressive on his range while the tapping percussion continues on, and over time there was a little bit of a reference that this was a dedication to his elder brother Noel, and I like the idea of the switching the lyrics around onto the chorus, because the first chorus mentions about his abusive father, and then on the second chorus mentions Peggy, his mother, and while the instrumentation is a tiny bit pedestrian, I think this one did grow on me because it has a more of a gentle set of dynamics, obviously not as explosive of an opener, but I really dug this one quite a lot. Diamond in the Dark, the drums sound very lacking in a punch, and the writing was filling in a various amount of effects involving the change of instrumentation on funky guitars as well, and this is more or less onto, like, I would say, an alternative rock type of flavour than the Britpop blaring out guitar tones. The instrumentation was decent, but there's just something really on the nose about this one, because it's not all that fulfilling, not one of these tracks that really follows as precisely. While I did like More Power quite a lot, this one just tried its best. It had a separate attempt, but it's not one of the best cuts. Don't Go Halfway is one of the songs that I think is one of the other better numbers. A reversed guitar sound of distortion to begin the track, with a banging sound on drums, making it a psychedelic driving part on the performances from the beginning to the end. And there's a lot of the consistency. Liam's vocals were really, really good on this one. It has attachments onto these harmonies that moves along onto the later approaching moments on the whole track. But on this next track, for me, the most boring song on this record is the title track of Come On You Know. This is without question the most bland and repetitive number on this whole track. This is a repetitive loop on the hand claps and minimal places on the chords, and it's incredibly directionless with not much work that's been put into it. And even on the chorus, the melody was so poor, which is just totally a big shame, because it's as below average that it just does not go anywhere in these separate pieces as the track goes along. So I find that this is one of the weakest numbers in the repertoire in Liam Gallagher's career. Too Good for Giving Up thankfully goes back into the softer, slower paces. The piano-driven ballad, the influence is very strong here. Liam's words were quite motivational, and I think it's one of the best cuts on this album. His soaring vocals were brilliant, and the really sweet, calming sound on these violins sounds honest and as vulnerable. As I've mentioned on some of the previous songs before, I really enjoy this one so much. One of my personal favourites on this record. However, in my opinion, the worst number on this album is It Was Not Meant to Be, which started things major, brightly positive, with its adventurous sound on high strings and a poppy, colourful mood. But then, as it goes into it, the drums sound so raw in the background that it's like on a lo-fi quality. It becomes so inconsistent. These multiple switchable paces that goes all over the place. It feels to me very disjointed. This is to me one of the worst recording ideas on making something just experimental. But this is basically to me like something that Paul McCartney could have done and fixed it, because this track is absolutely complete bore from start to finish, with no delivery and anything definitive. The best single on the album is Everything's Electric, the next track. This is a strong number with Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters fame on the drums, and this rocks. It has a lot of attacking rhythm and the beat. The melody was presentable, standout chorus was perfect, the driving chords were rocking out, full of swagger. This is full of passionate power. One of, to me, the other strong presences across the board on this whole record, bar none. World's in Need, this is on a bluesy shuffle type of direction. It started promising at first, but as I dived into it, the more I like it. The harmonies sounded confident, a more percussive driven sound. You can hear these percussion taps and shakers. And I think that while the music is very effective on the simplicity, this is on a political side lyrically, but I appreciate the variety on it at the same time. It's well paced. It's, as I said, simple, but it's incredibly effective. Moscow Rules, this is without question the moodiest and ominous dark setting of the whole composition. This starts on, I guess, a bit of the jazzy type of composition, and the guitars were faintly playing as well, but as the music goes in, the same feeling of making it so minor and impending. The tone was really, really good. Beautiful onto the violins. You can hear a bit of the sounds of piano and a bit of the brass and saxophones here and there. This is a song that was pretty much passable, but I think that some of Liam's expressions on this one did sound really nice. I'm Free. This is another one that does not do anything at all for me. These generic opening guitar crunch tones, and then these padded beats come in. The lyrics were generic, and there were some weaker lyrical points on the record too. This one spoils the vibe because musically it's just a flare of noise and does not mash into a good taste of any flavors, because this progression was really weak and filler driven right from the start. Better Days. This is a song that I had mixed feelings on at first, but it did grow on me to appreciate it a lot better. The Tomorrow Never Knows style drum beat was looping. The trippy sound was all over the massive composition. I like this one a lot because onto the beat and the excellent changes onto the chords. I find it a little bit jarring though onto the vocals that sounded processed on these vocals on the chorus. That sound a bit unnatural, but nonetheless, I was very impressed with it over time on the droning and versatile presentation, reverse guitar effects, and this is personally one of the other highlights on the record. Oh Sweet Children, in terms of the standard edition of this record, I think this one was very strong. It's beautiful on the softer calmness and has an innocence to it. Liam's vocals did resonate, very gentle and comforting. The keyboards have their own separate ambience. The guitars on this one did sound really tight. And I find this one too to have a bit of that expression mode, Paul McCartney type of presence. But I will say that this is one of the other really good ones across this record. Now we're into the two bonus tracks from the deluxe edition side of things on this record. The Joker begins on these clean guitars on delays. A lot of diversity onto these drumming patterns. Was incredibly mediocre, and it does find something to really build something up, but this one was just not in it for me. But I find that the gospel female sounding backing vocals did sound really nice on here, but instrumentally it's incredibly subpar. And same goes on to the next and last track on this record, which is Wave. This opens on a lot of noisy distortion from the whole beginning point of the song. The structure was just straightforward, and as I was listening to the vocals, it had a bit of an awkward tone on the vocal harmony. The sound on the chorus did sound really edited, and it's like it's just a bit jumping up and down. It's like these different pieces of music are just fitted together than building something up. Lyrically, this has a reference once again onto Noel, and onto the last verse features a reference of his clothing brand, Pretty Green. But I find this one to have not one of the stronger aspects. So this is another one that is very mediocre in between. But the instrumentation was pretty much, by numbers. Overall, Come On You Know by Liam Gallagher. Personally for me, as I've said earlier, that this is one of these albums that I appreciate the essence of making something that was very unexpected and the variety. But as an album, as a whole, this was unfortunately not one of the best into this experimentalism. Yet to learn that I have been a fan of Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, which is still a very divided album for many Oasis fans. And I'm pretty sure that this album is going to get more attention into this very big division that this album has got so far. Vocally, I think some of the points of Liam's range, he had sounded at his absolute best in ages, like what he did on Why Me, Why Not. The musicianship was all here, but it's just that a lot of the majority on this record is pretty much on a very difficult and average point in my experience with the record, and that I only liked pretty much half of this album. But, dare I say it, for what it's worth of this album, this is still worth it for many fans to dive into something different. And with that being said, I'm curious to know what you personally think of this album in the comments down below. That's personally all I would like to say about Come On You Know by Liam Gallagher, and I'm going to give this album a 6 out of 10. Not one of my favourite albums of 22, which is a very big unfortunate feeling, because as I have been a fan of Liam for quite a long while now, and for a career that was going on for now 5 years, this is something that I appreciate what he wanted to achieve. But for me, this is personally an album that did have a lot of passion and dedication, not one of those albums that has a giant definition of well-crafted and all very big progression on its material. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.